The main finding of the gender and leadership study was that gender discrimination is still pervasive within the church. The most shocking finding was just the amount of pervasiveness of it. So 84% of female ministers reported experiencing some sort of gender discrimination within the Presbyterian Church. But less than half of members think that gender discrimination is a problem within the church. And that was our biggest finding, was this discrepancy between what happens and what people are aware of.
And we had asked people if they faced discrimination based on gender, if they faced prejudicial statements that they thought were based on gender, or if they faced harassment based on gender. And when people were given a chance to write more, the biggest thing they talked about was women talking about prejudicial statements they faced and discrimination they faced. And that included discrimination by pay, discrimination in terms of getting calls, and a lot of those were women who were interested in being pastors who had faced a lot of trouble getting either any kind of pastoral position or pastoral positions that they thought were appropriate to their training and their background.
Another really important and interesting finding is that if you just ask people whether or not they serve within a leadership role within the Presbyterian Church, you get equal numbers of men and women saying, yes, yes, I do. And you only see an inequality in gender when you break it down as far as type of leadership role, because men are more likely to have official positions, ones with titles and salaries attached to them, whereas women are more likely to have unofficial positions that are voluntary, titleless, and unpaid.
So men are more likely to be an elder or a clerk of session or a pastor, and women are more likely to do more of the work.
Amen, brother.
Men get the titles and women get the work.
We did, though, find that...
And the money.
And the money. We did, however, find that women are more likely, when they do have a titled position, they're asked to do more things than men are. We did find that, because we asked them...
That's right, even with the same titles.
Even with the same titles.
Okay, so.
And then also... I don't know if I'm going to remember this exactly, but whether you're married and have children matters.
Oh, that's right.
Right?
That's right. That was interesting.
That was really interesting too, because married men with children are more likely to have the title and the money and the position and the status, whereas women, they get married and have kids and they go to the voluntary roles. And I'm inferring causation here. We don't actually know, right? It could be that the men with the title and the money and the status are more likely to get married. But it could also be that women, upon getting more family roles, they step back in the career zone. It could be both.
Okay. A couple things that I was going to add. One had to do with this discrepancy between female teaching elders, female ministers in the Word and Sacrament, experiencing all this bias and other folks not being so aware of it. A factor that I think might be is shame. Women confront all these issues, they're not sure who they can talk to about it, and they may have actually had some experience of raising some of these issues with their session, with their Presbytery colleagues, with their seminary professors, and sort of getting punished for playing the gender card. So a mix of sort of strategy and shame. I think that women have learned to just shut up and put up with it and try to navigate and manage it, and that seems like a problem to me. And it also seemed like a problem to a number of these folks who were answering our survey, including folks who took the time to write out some of their experiences and how they felt about it. The other thing, you mentioned that very few of our people who responded to our survey said, you know, women shouldn't be in leadership. Women shouldn't be deacons. Women shouldn't be elders. Women definitely shouldn't be pastors. Very few people came out and said.
Very few, not none.
Right. So, but let's say you're on a pastor nominating committee and you're looking at 3 or 4 or 5 different folks, and let's say you even bring them and you go to some neutral pulpit sermon possibilities, and you know it's sort of on the edge about who you're actually going to call. There's a couple of candidates who are guys who seem good. There's a female candidate who seems good, and you've got a PNC of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, 8 people. It doesn't take more than 1 or 2 people to, in the back of their minds, have this idea, you know, I'm not sure about a woman being pastor of our church. Even in the back of their heads, it might only take one of them to kind of tip the balance. So you don't need 50 people of your 80-member church saying women can't be pastors, it might just be 1 or 2 people. So even that 10%, I think, can make a difference.
Yeah.
And especially when you get to these bigger churches with heads of staff where there's maybe several associate pastors. And again, it doesn't have to be voiced that much. It doesn't have to be everybody, but just 1 or 2 people can make a difference where, they're going to pick one of the guys.
What I have seen is what Presbyterians say and what Presbyterians believe are 2 different things. Some people have discussed this in politics as an effect that when there is a very progressive or a person of color candidate or a woman candidate or an LGBTQIA plus candidate, people openly say, oh, I'm voting for that person. But then when they get into the election booth, that doesn't happen. Even though they publicly say they vote for that person and they agree with that person, but they clearly don't vote that way because the person does not win. The other candidate often wins by a large margin. I don't know that Presbyterians know that that is happening. They believe in equality in their heads. They believe in equity. They believe that women ought to and do have the same rights as men.
I mean, I think that sexism is still so prevalent in the church and that we still don't believe women, even women don't believe women when they tell their story or share their experiences. I think that unfortunately it's just kind of woven into who we are as a church in some ways, that we accept some things or tolerate some things that are really actually unacceptable. I mean, you've named some of them, Rhashell, the pay inequities, the sexual harassment, having to just sort of find a way to survive in the system while taking things that should not even be anybody's experience. And unfortunately, I think that we're working in a context where not only are women's everyday experiences not necessarily believed or valued, but we are in a context where our theology and the framework by which we serve our God often is sort of a male construct. And so that sort of, to me, sets a tone already for how we interact with one another, how we interact with our faith, and how we live that faith in the world. And unfortunately, I think we have failed to sort of challenge a lot of those biases, and so we tolerate the effects of some of that in ways that I don't think are acceptable or that we should.
One of the root causes in our problem, and an answer to our discrepancy question, is connected to the structures that we continue to live in. A lot of times I refer to it as the 1789 church, and I refer to it that way because the women's organization is as old as that first General Assembly, moderated by John Witherspoon. The offices in Louisville sit on Witherspoon Street. So we still sit in this place where in 1789, Presbyterian women began to organize and began to do leadership development for women in those early days because they had no place in the church. They had no place at that General Assembly, and they wanted their voices to be heard, and they wanted to be able to do the mission they felt called to do. So if you carry that forward, I think that we're still sitting in those 1789 structures, or white male structures, where women, when they achieve certain positions in the church, they're feeling that in a lot of ways, and people are feeling it and may not even really realize that that's the air that they're breathing or the water that they're swimming in. So that when women are in these positions, they're more threatening to that status quo. They're more competitive with the structure that's understood and feels comfortable to a lot of people in the Presbyterian church.
Similarly, the people that I work with, especially the advocacy committees and the Advocacy Committee for Women's Concerns, who press us to not only focus on the important issues around the world that we need to be advocating on behalf of women and women of color, LGBTQIA+ folks, not only focusing on that and calling the church to focus on that based on the commitments we say that we've made, but also continuing to push the church in terms of, well, what does it mean that we're sort of just accepting all male language for the God we serve? What does it mean that we accept only, or focusing heavily on the fact that Jesus came as the Son of God and focusing always on the maleness and calling Lord? What does that do to us as people? How does that shift and impact how we treat one another, how we interact with the world and take our faith into the world? And so I think what gives me hope is that there are folks who are engaged with this, looking out and also looking in and calling us to be better and do better, and to challenge ourselves continuously on what are these movements that we just take each Sunday or in our liturgies, so on and so forth, that really do have impact, but maybe we're not paying close attention. So those are the people that give me hope and that I find exciting to engage with as I do.
And so I feel like finding my voice is a constant process. And it's one that's really formed in community of conversation with other women, but also with many other leaders in both church and society to really listen for how we can best envision equality, justice, and really embody love.
I think we're really at a very difficult moment where for years and years we've talked about having people of different genders, different sexual orientations, people of different skin colors and ethnicities. Diversity enhances our community. And I think we kind of believe it on most days, but we're not willing to suffer the uncomfortableness that is precipitated by having difference. So I don't mean to evade the question, but I think more in terms of what I hope for than what's actually happening, what I see signs of. One is that as we add more women, that's an interesting phrasing, but as more women enter into leadership roles, not just as associate ministers, but as head of staff, women in charge, and as more people of color are in worship and in leadership roles, and queer people are in leadership roles, I think it kind of forces, in a good way, everyone to think more about their own stories and their own bodies, because there's no longer a normative body. We're all normative bodies. You know, it's not just the white male body that's normative. Even white men have to think about, who am I now, when they see someone who's different. It's like,
so I just temper all of it, whether we're talking race, class, or whatever it is, by dealing with the world as it is. So as an organizer, I deal with people. We deal with the world as it is. That's part of the diagnosis, right, on the cancer. Deal with the world as it is. Take a full, hard look at it, and we'll do that together. We'll do that together, not alone, together. Then we talk about the world as it can be. What's possible? And a lot of our church people deal with the world as it was, not the world as it is, and have lost an ability to imagine, I think, the world as it can and should be.
I now have a pastoral voice. I am an ordained minister of Word and Sacrament, but developing a voice as a Black person, as a Black female within the denomination is difficult. We are a minority. I would say in this presbytery there are probably 300 African American Presbyterians that are in churches here, and approximately 300 out of 53 churches, or however many in the presbytery. So, that number may be slightly higher or whatever. But it's very difficult, to express the needs that we have. Our churches are different. Each church has their own flavor, as in other churches. So it's difficult to have a voice when you come to the table and be able to articulate those in conjunction with the standards that are set for congregations. Like what we may consider, the majority may consider a viable congregation, doesn't always work for small congregations, particularly those that are serving in urban communities. We don't have big budgets, but we manage to do the work of ministry by partnering with outside organizations and doing some things like that. So there's just this constant tension between, a survey saying, oh, we're not a viable congregation. And then somebody else says, yes, but if you're not there, we don't get food on the third Tuesday. Or we don't, get to send our kids up to Vacation Bible School. Or, it's just a lot of things like that. So that, finding my voice as an African American female, and then as an African American person in a mainline denomination is difficult.
I think to answer directly the question of how the church in its Reformed tradition can and should stand in solidarity, specifically, I think of my own experience as I've journeyed with the denomination and growing into myself, understanding who God is, who God made me, what does that mean for my work, wrestling with all of that, which we all do when we go into theological studying. And then getting to this moment where I'm told, we don't see how all you do, and this is a direct quote, fits within the paradigm of ordained ministry. And having to wrestle with what do you mean you don't see it? I don't understand. I've left my home, I've left my country, I'm following a call. What's confusing? I don't understand. And to think that the church could and should stand in solidarity, it means questioning what you think you know. I was told that with the hand on the Book of Order. I don't see how what all you do fits within our paradigm of ordained ministry. Well, I don't know what to tell you about your choice to limit your own vision. I can't help you with that. And so in our tradition, we've embraced the questions, we've embraced the study, we've conversed the truth now with the text of before. We've done that before, so it's not like we can't. We're making a conscious choice, and I wish we'd stop.
Yeah, I remember once also I was coming I was in an elevator and there was and I was wearing my collar and someone said, how can we call you non? What? So even people say, how do we call you? It was strange for them to see a woman wearing a collar at that time. But after 35 years, I think that we have come a long way, and I'm happy now that we have, at least among Hispanic, that we have many other Latinas in the ministry. That, in a sense, I feel good that I helped them to open the doors for them to come and even though they still face challenges, but it's a little bit more better now than before.
It's going to be a heck of a lot easier if you're dealing with someone with parents who accept you. But it is also, I hope, a changing understanding of human identity.
Yes.
And that, as a theologian, I want to say that who we are is both gift and task. I'm totally stealing this from Karl Rahner. That God gives you an identity that is who you are.
Yes.
But you also have to work your way. You've got to grow into that, and that requires effort and a process of becoming. And when I look at the young people who are willing to do that, I'm in awe.
And we have this history that has really begun in the past few decades of women and non-binary people and people of color and LGBTQ plus folks coming at scripture with a level of suspicion, of ownership, of reclaiming and reframing what we've received that maybe has been cloaked, not maybe, has been cloaked in white supremacy culture, in patriarchy. And we have this really beautiful thing happening here, but too many people are just letting it sit in the world of scripture. And so what I'm finding interesting right now happening around these things is how do we bring that technique of looking at something and really trying to, with a critical lens, unearth what is being communicated, of what is happening in the stories, to our own tradition, to the rituals that we're practicing within our congregations, to the spaces we're operating within. And how do we do that in a way that really is structurally disruptive and happens on both small and large scale? And I think about things like the Eucharist and what does it mean when you are sitting as a congregant and someone asks you to come forward towards the front of the church, where presumably you're becoming closer to God, right? Do you embody this sense that otherwise you're apart? Or what does it mean if your congregation isn't accessible and all of a sudden you're practicing this community ritual where someone's disability prevents them from participating? And so we have these tools that we're using for scripture that we're not using as frequently to look at our actual embodiment of our faith in our everyday life. And so I think
Micah 6:8, what does O mortal, what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before your God. And then how that is exemplified in the personhood of Jesus Christ and in the Godhood of Christ as well. Then it is, to me, a clear example and a clear manuscript of how the church is to carry out its mandate. And so in terms of intersectionality and intersectional justice, I believe that the Bible calls our Reformed tradition and us as individual believers to the work of doing justice, and however that shows up. And so our work is to those who are incarcerated. Our work is to those who are on the margins. Our work is to those who are the fringes of society, who are deemed the other than, the least of these, according to our religious language. And so in doing that work and earnestly doing that work, not only as God requires it, but as even society dictates it, it must be intersectional. It has to include a lens on reproductive justice just as much as it includes a lens on incarceration, as much as it includes a lens on the LGBTQIA plus community, as well as those who suffer from environmental justice. I mean, that's the work of what it means to be a follower of Christ, is to embody the word in a way that causes us to be examples of Christ and to be salt and light in the world. And honestly, my personal opinion, if we're not doing that, then we're not in a position to call ourselves believers or followers of Christ. And however you walk that out in your personal context.